which has general circulation in the region of Waterloo. The notice of public meeting was posted on the region's website as of July the 7th, and the draft ROPA was available to the public online as of July the 7th, 2021. In accordance with Section 17 of the Planning Act, a statutory open house was held on July the 19th, 2022 in person from 2 to 4 p.m. and from 6 to 8 p.m. Further, notice of the public meeting was given to the prescribed persons and public bodies as required by Section 17 and 26 of the Planning Act in accordance with Ontario Regulation 543/06. Any person who would like to be notified of Council's decision on the proposed regional official plan amendment should provide their full name, address, postal code, and telephone number in writing by email to regionalclerk@regionofwaterloo.ca. Comments from the community engagement sessions, open house, and today's meeting will inform the regional official plan amendment as part of a report to this committee on August the 11th, 2022. This report will also provide staff's recommendations regarding the proposed amendment. If you are watching the webcast of this meeting and would like to address the committee at the end of the registered delegations, you can contact Regional Clerk at regionofwaterloo.ca during the meeting to obtain the link. Delegations that register during the meeting will be given 3 minutes to speak after the registered delegations. You can also submit written comments to Regional Clerk at regionofwaterloo.ca. We have so far 27 delegations. We'll plan to have a break around 5 p.m. We'll take an assessment of where we are at that particular point in time, and in all likelihood, we'll have a short break at that time. I'll now ask if there's any declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Councillor Verbanovich.
Thank you very much, Chair Galloway. And while we're not making decisions today, this is a public meeting for this issue that we'll be considering on August 11th and the 18th. And I'd like to declare that because the proposed ROP document includes reference to the new regional intensification corridor along the entire length of Ottawa Street, I have a family member that owns property in proximity to that. And as a result, I will declare a conflict on any discussion or issues pertaining to that. I guess if there are, I would only request that if there are, for ease on the 11th and 18th, if there are any recommendations specifically in regards to that, if staff can sort of separate them out in the recommendations so that I can vote on the rest of the document. Thank you. And if I can ask the clerk to forward the necessary form to fill out, please.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Urbanovic, and direct staff to do that if necessary during the upcoming meetings. So we will have a relatively short presentation from staff, and I will turn now to Danielle DeFields, our Director of Community Planning, to provide that. Danielle?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me okay?
We can.
All right. Thank you so much, and good afternoon. The purpose of this public meeting is to receive comments from the public on the proposed amendment to the Regional Official Plan. The proposed Regional Official Plan amendment was released on June 29th and was circulated for agency, stakeholder, and public review and feedback per our statutory requirements in the prescribed manner. A statutory public meeting is required under the Planning Act for any amendment to an official plan. No decisions will be made today. Staff will review and consider any feedback or comments from the public at the public meeting and report back to Council on the results of the overall consultation process at our next meeting on August 11th. Next slide. The amendment establishes the planning framework for the Regional Official Plan to accommodate Waterloo Region's forecasted population and employment growth to 2051 in conformity with Schedule 3 of the Growth Plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. It will help guide strategic decisions regarding land use planning and a range of regional services. This includes transportation, public transit, water and wastewater supply and services, public health, economic development, affordable housing, and others. The amendment also updates several other planning policies, objectives, and mapping within the regional official plan to ensure they conform with the growth plan and the Greenbelt plan or do not conflict with them, consistent with the provincial policy statement. Next slide. The ultimate goal of the draft amendment is to support Waterloo Region's long-term growth and development in a way that achieves an equitable, thriving, and sustainable regional community for all residents. Overall, the draft policies are bold, they show leadership, and they challenge us to think and act with greater regard towards transformative climate action. They're an enabling and true transformation into an equitable, prosperous, resilient, low-carbon community. Next slide. The Regional Official Plan Amendment promotes intensification by setting a region-wide intensification target that requires a minimum of 61% of new residential development occur annually within the delineated built-up area. It also supports a region-wide density of 59 people and jobs per hectare for development in designated greenfield areas. This will support the vision of achieving 15-minute neighborhoods, which are compact, well-connected places where people can meet their daily needs for goods, services, and employment within a 15-minute trip from home by walking, cycling, and rolling. As a result of the land needs assessment, the amendment proposes to add 150 hectares of new community area land and 456 hectares of employment area land in strategically located areas to help achieve the development of 15-minute neighborhoods. This will ensure that we have the land to support population and employment growth to 2051. The amendment also emphasizes affordable and missing middle housing and supports a range and mix of housing types. Next slide. Additional highlights of the amendment include the list that's shown on the screen. We've had many meaningful conversations with First Nations leading up to the development of the amendment, and we've integrated Indigenous values and history into the Regional Official Plan. This includes adding a land acknowledgement in Chapter 1 of the Regional Official Plan. And there's still more to come through the second amendment anticipated in 2023, particularly when it comes to some of the updates to the natural environment policies. In terms of transformational climate action, there's two main aspects that are reflected in the draft policies. This includes a focus on clean energy transition and reducing greenhouse gas emissions through prioritizing active mobility networks and transit over automobile travel, as well as direction on new green development standards. The second aspect is focused on improving resilience of communities and infrastructure by managing stormwater and reducing flooding and supporting urban agriculture and a thriving food system. With regard to equity and inclusion, the plan strives to build communities where every person feels safe, valued, and cared for. And the planning processes seek to end systemic racism and facilitate equity and social justice.
Hey guys, can I grab a cart for the range?
Equity and social justice by working towards reconciliation, anti-racism, anti-oppression, and systemic change through engagement with affected residents to create a better community for everyone. From the perspective of economic prosperity, the amendment has a focus on employment land, including ensuring a supply and distribution of employment lands throughout the region, as well as a policy framework for employment lands. And then lastly, the policies in the plan support a sustainable Waterloo region by providing a growth management framework that promotes the efficient use of existing land and infrastructure and fiscally sustainable infrastructure phasing, delineates and enhances policies with respect to major transit station areas, identifies and protects employment areas, and strengthens policies to attract, support, and retain both traditional and emerging industries. Also promotes attractive and vibrant public realm and identifies new regional intensification corridors. Next slide. So in terms of next steps, the purpose of the meeting today is to listen to feedback from the public. We'll collect all of the feedback and comments we've received to date and at the statutory public meeting today, and make adjustments to the draft policies and mapping that take these feedback and comments into consideration. On August 11th, there will be a staff report at Planning and Works Committee that will present the proposed recommended amendment. It will also provide a high-level response to the submissions we received and explain any proposed policies adjustments that are based on engagement to date. The Planning and Works Committee will then discuss the staff report and consider a recommendation for adoption on August 18th by Regional Council. We anticipate bringing forward a second amendment to the regional official plan, focusing on policy areas such as natural heritage, water systems, agricultural systems, aggregates, transportation, and additional focus on climate action in 2023. Next slide. That concludes our presentation for today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Danielle. Okay, we'll now move on to what we're really here for, and that is to hear and listen to the delegations. As listed on the agenda, again, I want to reiterate, while we're hearing the delegations today, no decisions are being made today. There will not be any debate today. As Danielle has indicated, August the 11th and August the 18th are those type of meetings, are those meetings that will deal with that activity. I would like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. First, please leave your video and camera turned off and your microphone and audio muted until you are called upon to speak. Today's delegations will be allotted 5 minutes to speak. Groups of 2 or more will be allotted 10 minutes. I don't think we have any of those today. Any delegations who registered after the deadline will be allotted 3 minutes to speak. These time allotments are in line with the pilot project that has been undertaken since 2021 and will continue to be followed this afternoon. Reminder, if you're watching the webcast of this meeting and would like to address the committee at the end of the registered delegations, you can contact Regional Clerk, all one word, Regional Clerk at Region of Waterloo, all one word, .ca during the meeting to obtain the link. We also ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed. You are then welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting being webcast live via YouTube. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in immediate removal from the meeting, interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements, turning your camera on and off at inappropriate times, or any kind of hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations, please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. Okay, so we will now start with our first delegation, and that is Mr. Paul Florica from Woolwich. Paul, are you there? There he is. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Paul Florica. I am the president of Klondike Homes. I've been building custom homes in the region for the better part of 25 years. I learned about the fact that the region was working on an official plan amendment thanks to a write-up in the KW Record the day after the June 29th meeting. This came as a surprise to me, as I was under the impression the official plan was applicable until 2030. I also learned that the proposed changes would be in place until 2051. I then realized that these changes will clearly dictate the future of my children with respect to custom home building in the region. I do understand that custom homes reflect a small segment of the overall housing market. However, I also believe that it is a segment of the market that should definitely not be ignored. Our clients typically consist of employers of all sorts, engineers of all sorts, dentists, doctors, and other professionals who have done well for themselves through hard work and time. These folks typically do not purchase homes unless they find close to what they want. In almost every case, our clients are move-up buyers. This means that they are leaving behind a home that is more affordable than the home they are moving into. This more affordable home now becomes available to other families to enjoy. This quite often begins a healthy chain reaction from the top of the market right down to the bottom. I would also like to touch on a situation that has been happening now for years. We have plenty of potential clients who would like to downsize from large homes in places like Beechwood, Colonial Acres, etc., but absolutely refuse to live in condos For years now, we have not had the ability to tap into this market because we do not have building lots large enough to accommodate a larger bungalow with at least some sort of covered porch at the rear of the home. It's not just about the width of the lots. You need a minimum depth as well. These folks likely age in place in their large single-family homes, even though their children have all but left the nest. They are basically aging in place in the wrong product, and at the same time, holding back an attainable single-family home from another family. Klondike Homes typically has 15 to 20 custom under construction at any given time. We are currently down to 6. Almost all of these homes are being built on available building lots purchased through developers in new subdivisions. Once these homes are built, our inventory of building lots in new subdivision goes to 0. This scenario only gives us one choice, and that is to begin tearing down older homes and replacing them with new ones. This typically almost triples the value of that particular property. Eventually, we will lose much of the attainable housing stock by doing so. Do we know what the carbon footprint is for placing attainable homes into the back of dump trucks and hauling them to the landfills? We keep hearing the term the missing middle, but from our perspective, the term could simply be missing almost everything except condos. What about the abandoned idea of the region amalgamating? Any particular reason for that? There are sewer and water services that come to dead ends in multiple areas throughout the city.
Mr. Florica, 1 minute, please.
Thank you. Would this not help with immediate housing stock and affordability? In closing, this is not only a local issue, it's provincial and federal as well. We now have 450,000 people who are becoming part of our communities every year. I urge council and staff to please reconsider their calculations for single-family homes needed in the region. I also urge council and staff to please not ignore reality, as the consequences of doing so is already upon us. Thank you all for your time. My utmost respect to all of you for the decisions you will soon be making on our behalf.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. Okay, we'll move on then to the next delegation. That's Kevin Eby. Kevin, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Kevin Eby, and for the purposes of this presentation, I'll introduce myself as the former Director of Community Planning at the Region of Waterloo. Among my responsibilities while I was in that position was overseeing the preparation of the new regional plan that came to Regional Council for approval in 2009. There are many similarities between then and what is occurring now as Council ponders how to proceed with this version of the new ROP. In 2009, the region was working with deadlines established by the province. In 2009, the developers claimed the region's methodology for determining land needs was faulty. In 2009, there were numerous delegations seeking to bring additional agricultural land into the urban area. In 2009, the developers felt far less homes would fit on the existing vacant designated greenfield land than the region did. In 2009, the developers claimed the region, in 2000, my computer and I are having a fight. In 2009, threats were made by developers that if they didn't get what they wanted, they would appeal to the OMB. So what happened? In 2009, Council trusted staff and supported its recommendations, thereby setting in place a plan that fundamentally changed this community forever. Council then followed that up by committing resources to both defend and implement the new ROP. The issues you're facing today and the people are speaking to are really no different than we faced in 2009. And council took strong action at that point. And then the sky didn't fall and the community prospered. This was in part because the policy changes proposed helped facilitate changes already occurring in the constantly evolving marketplace. And that change continues to this day. Today, the region is the envy of many throughout the province of Ontario. While others are working hard to catch up, the region is now in a position to approve a set of next generation policies that will keep this community at the forefront of innovation and prepared for the key challenges it will face over the next 30 years. Regional staff has met the first step of this challenge by proposing the ROP amendment that's before you today. I won't comment today on specific policies, but suffice to say they've been developed in good faith by professionals with the broad public interest in mind. I suspect you're going to hear a lot of criticism of this proposal today from people whose personal or corporate interests don't necessarily align with what is proposed. That is perfectly normal as part of this process. But I urge council not to get sidetracked. Trust your staff just as you trusted them in 2009. I fully believe they're on the right track and will not let you down. The challenges we face today are significant, even bordering on overwhelming at times. And never before in my career have we needed leadership like we need it today. If we're going to survive these challenges, there are millions of decisions to be made by millions of people. But don't underestimate the importance of the decision you will make a month from now when the ROP amendment comes before you for approval. Your leadership is needed now more than ever. And I certainly we've survived the last decade and a half.
1 minute, Kevin. 1 minute.
With a new set of policies that were incredibly innovative. And what staff is trying to do at this point is put policies in front of you that build on that. And I hope you head down that road and we head down it together. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Councillor McGarry.
Thanks very much, and through you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to ask and to clarify with Mr. Eby about some of the ways that we compare ourselves in Waterloo region versus some of the other municipalities or other jurisdictions, other countries, for instance, in looking at some of the housing needs that we have. And I have a sense that because of the makeup of our demographics, we may not, that the housing needs, the housing types that we're looking at for the next, for our growth for the next 30, 40 years may not necessarily be comparable to the statistics that we might see coming out of other G7 countries. Can you clarify for me about sort of the age and makeup of our demographics versus some of the other jurisdictions? Because I've heard some people trying to compare ourselves with Europe or Germany or US or other jurisdictions and the types of housing that they may be looking at versus what we have here in Waterloo region.
Yeah, I meant to close by saying I'm going to do a submission on that very issue, and I would encourage you to read it when it does come in. The region of Waterloo has a median age of 38 years of age, meaning half above, half below 38. When you look at the G7 nations, none of them are as low as 38. The lowest is the USA at 38.5. Japan is, if I'm not mistaken, 48. Germany is in the about 47.5, if I'm not mistaken, and they go down from there. So what you're comparing when you compare the G7 to the region of Waterloo is really apples and oranges. If you want to compare, and the paper that I'm doing actually takes a look at direct comparables with very similar age groups, are Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, the USA, and Canada. And when you look at the housing needs in those countries, they're very similar to what we have here in the region of Waterloo. There's no massive structural shortfall as is being implied by some people. And certainly the structure types in my analysis appear reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you. And through the chair, Kevin, hello, it's been a long time. Just wanted to point out that your point being made of the age grouping, but we're talking 2051.
Mm-hmm.
You and I will 30 years down the road, and if we don't build the type of houses that draw in the people, our age difference may be phenomenal. Just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on. Next delegation is Kevin Thomason.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
You can, Kevin, yes. Welcome.
Excellent. Honorable mayors, councillors, and guests. My name is Kevin Thomason, and I am a co-founder of Smart Growth Waterloo Region. It has been a long journey with the regional official plan over the past 3 years since attending the first open houses in the autumn of 2019. There have been inadequate drafts that have fallen short, bold proposals for no farmland loss, community and council meetings throughout the region, thousands of letters and emails, and countless hours put in by citizens across Waterloo Region speaking up for the future that they want to see. We're now in the home stretch, the bold and visionary plan that has the climate solutions and sustainable, complete neighborhoods we're going to need. This plan addresses concerns about housing supply, housing choice, housing affordability, and the missing middle. It should provide more affordable homes in more locations and allow people to age in their own neighborhood and not have to leave because there isn't the housing they need or can afford. It addresses transportation needs with a focus on active transportation, public transportation, and even completely new concepts like Phase 3 of Iona LRT running east-west across Kitchener in a brilliant intensification corridor linking the airport to the Odd, to downtown, to other LRT lines, and to so many neighborhoods and services across the core of our region. While progressive and even pioneering in some aspects, it continues the same smart growth trajectory, and I predict it will serve us well as our last innovative, successful regional official plan. It seems that aside from some of the development community and disappointed land speculators, almost all the feedback from recent open houses and the public is extremely supportive. City of Kitchener staff have drafted several excellent reports stating that they don't have any significant concerns and are satisfied the provincial requirements are being met. Most other area councils and staff have also expressed support and passed motions in favor of this recommended approach to growth for these proposed regional official plan amendments. While it is unfortunate to see any farmland loss, the very small 150 hectares of expansion being permitted over the next 30 years is focused on helping our rural townships provide new housing forms and services to create more complete and sustainable communities. Additional greenfield urban sprawl is not needed. Our cities already have thousands of greenfield DGA homes that will be built in the coming years. Prematurely adding additional lands, as some are requesting now, that won't come on stream until the mid-2040s at the earliest, is going to do nothing to address affordability or other current issues. Regional staff, consultants, professional planners, and professors have concluded there is already adequate land supply until at least 2051. Even if they're all wrong, there is still the opportunity to address any issues many times in the years ahead in the mandatory 5-year ROP reviews. Having declared a climate emergency and with a pending food crisis, there is no need to doom additional prime farmland to destruction. It simply isn't in the best public interest. Market trends, our current climate crisis, and what people can afford is clear, and we're heading in the direction of needing less land, not more. There is no shortage of greenfield homes in Waterloo Region. Shifts and patterns have been clear for 20 years, and there are hundreds of homes for sale right now, eager to find a buyer. What is being sought is the more affordable apartments, duplexes, laneway homes, and accessory units at the missing middle that this ROP will better address. In conclusion, we all know that we live in some of the best communities in Canada and that we are the envy of so many. We have planned well and our communities are leading the world. It isn't an accident. For decades, Waterloo Region has pioneered and become renowned for innovative planning that has been unique, bold, and progressive, but also carefully planned well considered, and strongly supported by our community. Yet, developers have challenged and tried to stop things time and time again. Every single word of our last ROP was challenged for years in courts and at the OMB. We wouldn't have light rail transit, environmentally sensitive landscapes, or even the countryside line if we had listened to all the opponents. Myself and so many others in our community have fought time and time again for all these things that were, thank you, were so bold or scary at the time, and yet appear common sense in hindsight and are taken for granted now as essential components of our region. Regional staff and planners have been better at forecasting, better at anticipating the future, and we should pay attention again to all their clear recommendations now. Our businesses, our universities, our startups, and so many in our community expect Waterloo Region to continue to lead our province and nation. This proposed regional official plan with a sustainability and climate change focus, along with minimal farmland loss and 15-minute complete communities, is the bold, visionary plan we're going to need to thrive in the decades ahead. You have strong public support. Please do not delay or defer. We need these solutions now for our housing and climate challenges. Please support this regional official plan amendment with a strong, unanimous regional council approval. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and Kevin, nice to see you again. Kevin, if we can you, you wrote a blazing recommendation on how my plan, my CAO showed that one size does not fit all. Doesn't work for North Dumfries. Do people understand that saving farmland is just saving land for aggregate, and over 70% of North Dumfries is aggregate, and therefore we're saving nothing because we know the destruction of the land through aggregate never goes back to good farming. And the head of farming stated that as well. So one size doesn't fit all. Do we not have to treat each municipality in the region a bit differently? And Kevin, just to say, we as councillors have to hear all sides, not just one side. And so...
Councillor Foxton, I don't want us to...
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that Kevin agrees that at the Township of North Dumfries is different. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I really like about this regional official plan, and I think has been done so well, is the fact that we have a plan that fits for our rural townships as well as our urban cities. You know, I think there's been a real effort to reach out to communities across the region, and community groups, farming groups, agriculture groups, seniors groups. It's been amazing to see all the people, even just look at the delegation list today of folks from almost every township, every part of our community speaking up here. And I think that this is where we've done very well with a broad plan that meets a wide variety of needs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next delegation is Barbara Shoemaker. Barbara, welcome.
Thank you very much. I wish today to speak with mayors, councillors, and staff. I'm speaking on behalf of 50 by 30 Waterloo Region. We want to thank you for hearing citizens' concerns about the climate, our future food security, and preservation of the region's valuable fertile soil. We wholeheartedly support the draft regional official plan that's been presented today. And I want to speak to the developers, their representatives, and council advocates who are dissatisfied with the recommended plan and are continuing to argue their position and their interests. Posted on July 18th, 2022 in The Guardian, the opinion of George Monbiot, the British writer known for his environmental and political activism. Can we talk about it now? I mean, the subject most of the media and most of the political class has been avoiding for so long. You know, the only subject that ultimately counts, the survival of life on Earth. Everyone knows, however carefully they avoid the topic, that beside it, all the topics on the front pages and obsessing the pundits are dust. Even the Times editors still publishing columns denying climate science know it. Even the candidates for the Tory leadership, ignoring or downplaying the issue, know it. Never has a silence been so loud or so resonant. But while the people who dominate the means of communication frantically avoid the subject, the planet speaks, in a roar becoming almost impossible to ignore. These days of atmospheric rage, these heat shocks and wildfires ignore the angry shushing and burst rudely into our silent retreat. It cannot now be long unless immediate and comprehensive measures are taken before these days of rage become the norm, even in our once temperate climatic zone. And from Peter Kalmus, climate scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, quote, "Climate catastrophes are arriving with a frequency and ferocity that have shocked climate scientists. The fact that climate models failed to predict the intensity of the summer's heat waves and flooding suggests that severe impacts will come sooner than previously thought. As a climate scientist, I am terrified by what I see coming. I want world leaders to stop hiding behind magical thinking and feel the same terror. Then they would finally end fossil fuels," end quote. The climate emergency is here now, but so are the solutions. And our communities need you, developers, contractors, planners, and architects, to lead with green development, net zero construction, complete, livable, and affordable communities, because a critically important climate mitigation solution involves land use that abandons the solutions of yesterday. Mitigation solutions end urban sprawl with highways forever under construction and traffic congestion. Solutions urgently needed minimize and absorb carbon emissions. Solutions must halt paving over Ontario's fertile.
1 minute.
A recent
Barbara.
CBC article, thank you, by Evan Dyer says the Canadian Census of Agriculture revealed this year that farmland in Ontario in 2021 was lost to development at a rate of 319 acres a day, about 240 NFL football fields. That rate of loss is more than 3 times what it was in the last census in 2016. We invite developers, investment landowners, and contractors to join municipal leaders and climate-concerned citizens in a partnership to take on the challenge of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2030. We have the solutions. We need the collective will and your expertise. Stop calling for delays. Join in the fight for a safe climate future for all of our children. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shoemaker. No questions, so we'll carry on to our next delegation, and that's Joshua Rampersad. Joshua, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Chair, members of the council and staff. Thank you for having me. My name's Josh. My partner, Gemma, and I have lived in the region for 5 years now and have recently made the leap to buy a home and settle down in Kitchener long term. Alongside over 900,000 current and future residents of the region, we have a vested interest in how the region will develop over the next 30 years. It is for this reason that I'm here to voice my support for the proposed Regional Official Plan amendment and to urge the members of the council to vote to adopt it on August 11th. The amendment, while not perfect, aligns in many ways with our priorities of climate action and lowering the cost of living. As young adults, the climate emergency is of the utmost concern for my partner and I. It is vital that the official plan propels the region towards sustainability and resiliency. Central to this is reducing the region's greenhouse gas emissions. As Appendix D of the recommended approach to growth clearly shows, developing the region with higher density will lead to lower emissions and a lower cost of energy for the region. The minimum density targets in Chapter 2 and policies in Chapter 3 from the amendment are a step in the right direction. Allowing additional residential units and building more mid and high density housing of all types for individuals and also for families is essential if the region is going to be more sustainable. This is in part why I find the feedback from developers requesting more land to develop low density single family homes counterproductive and pretty reprehensible. Hand in hand with higher density is also building communities that allow residents to meet their needs without needing to drive. This is beneficial for the climate as well as for quality of life. The policies in the amendment that work toward creating 15-minute complete neighborhoods are great. We need more transit supportive development in the region, and empowering residents to meet their needs within 15 minutes of their home will be amazing for sustainability. On top of that, 15-minute neighborhoods will also lower the cost of living for residents of the region. When development essentially forces residents to own a vehicle in order to meet daily needs, it places an undue financial burden on them. It also excludes those who are unable to drive for whatever reason, if they're too old, too young, or have a disability, and prevents them from fully participating in public life. To again reference Appendix D from the recommended approach to growth, a more compact and walkable built environment presents multiple financial benefits to both residents and to the region. I'm particularly excited about the policies in the amendment that promote mixed-use development and encourage reduced parking standards. These will be key pieces in reducing the cost of living within the region. In this time of sky-high inflation and absurdly unattainable housing costs, bold action, like what is in the amendment, is what is necessary. My partner and I have really appreciated all of the work that has gone into preparing the amendment and the recommended approach to growth. We've particularly appreciated how responsive council and staff have been to public feedback. This amendment is ambitious in making the region more sustainable and affordable. I believe that it puts us on the right track, and I encourage the members of the council to vote to support it on August 11th. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Josh. And we'll carry on then. Our next delegation is Paul Britton. Paul, are you there? Here you are.
Yes, thank you, Chair Galloway. I'll attempt screen share. If not, I'll ask the clerk to assist. So some assistance would be, oh, here it is.
Can we assist Mr. Britton? Here it goes. There we go.
Yeah, very good. So Chair Galloway and committee, I'm here on behalf of Activa with respect to the lanes in Southwest Kitchener. And my presentation is broken into really 3 or 4 parts. One is sort of some background. The second is a request. The third is some commentary with respect to the technical brief, which is before you. And finally, the rationale and support of Southwest Kitchener. Next slide, please. So as council is aware, we prepared an independent LNA, which includes both an assessment of land supply as well as housing need. And that evaluation has confirmed the need for an expansion of about 950 hectares. We think there's sufficient justification for 240 hectares to be located within the city of Kitchener. Next slide, please. The candidate expansion sites are shown in blue. The Activa lanes in Southwest Kitchener are shown highlighted in red. And the Activa lanes comprise approximately 50 hectares. And then the Grampian lanes are located immediately to the east between New Dundee Road and the Blair Creek Drive extension. Next slide, please. This particular slide focuses on the Activa and the Grampian lanes for which I'm representing. Next slide, please. In terms of the technical brief, which is before you, we received it late Friday, and we've had the opportunity to review it. And I think the most important thing is it fails to evaluate comprehensively all expansion proposals which have been submitted. Rather, it's somewhat of a bootstrap approach where it reviews only the expansion lands that are recommended. It would be our submission that the analysis that's required has not been completed, and Mr. Howe will speak to that in further detail. Next slide, please. Most importantly, in terms of the agricultural assessment, there has been no evaluation of attempts to minimize and mitigate the impacts on the agricultural system. There's been no comparative analysis with respect to Southwest Kitchener in terms of the 50-minute neighborhood concept. And much of the analysis has been deferred to a future date. And it would be my submission that that information should be available to this public meeting, but most importantly, available to council when you render your decision. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. In terms of Southwest Kitchener, because it wasn't presented by your staff, we thought we would take the opportunity to present it today. The Activa lanes are shown in the red hatching. And as you can see, it's contiguous to the existing community, which is a fundamental planning principle and represents the logical rounding out of the Dundee North community. It's within walking distance of a transit hub, which is immediately to the north. It represents the logical extension of the Fisher-Hallman Road transit corridor, which connects directly to the East-West Ottawa Street transit corridor, which is proposed. It's within bus distance to the Huron Business Park, the Trillium Industrial Business Park. It's within walking distance of a major district park, which includes a significant aquatic center. It's within walking distance of existing schools, and 3 of them are planned within the area. So it would be our submission that Southwest Kitchener generally and the Activa lanes in particular represent probably the poster child of a 50-minute neighborhood within the city of Kitchener. Next slide, please. So this just identifies some of the uses in the area: food stores, employment, District Clarke, the transit corridor, which is represented on the plan. Next slide, please. So in terms of why Southwest Kitchener, next slide, please. In terms of the policy framework, we're contiguous to the urban area. There's no breach at the countryside line. We're not regional recharge. We're not protected countryside. There's available services with capacity that has been paid for in the ground, which would be wasted if development was diverted elsewhere. Other than the growth plan, other provincial policies and plans do not apply to the subject lands. And the lanes, most importantly, are not protected countryside. Next slide, please. So, and next slide, please. So from an agricultural impact perspective, we've heard a lot about agriculture. The Activa lands are undersized parcels of land that don't satisfy minimum agricultural requirements for farms. There's no conflict with MDS requirements. Next slide, please. The lands are characterized by relatively steep slopes. The lands will be bisected by roads and infrastructure that's required for lands that are already within the urban area. So it's our summary conclusion that from an agricultural perspective, adding the Activa lanes to the urban area will not impact negatively on the region's agri-food network. Next slide, please.
If you could wrap up.
Next slide,
Britton, please.
Yes, I'll wrap up now. From Activa as a builder, they build complete communities, including missing middle housing, all the way down to lower density housing, townhomes, stack towns. Next slide, please. Activa is committed to collaborating with the city and the region in planning and developing green infrastructure, providing affordable housing, including an affordable housing contribution, complete community objectives. The previous delegation spoke to net zero housing construction. Activa is a leader in the field and is committed to net zero housing construction in the neighborhood, including working with the city and the region as far as district energy and energy hub initiatives. In conclusion, we would ask that you support including the Activa lanes within the urban areas, part of the process which is underway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Britton. The next delegation is Peter Van Loan. Mr. Van Loan, there you are.
Here I am. Good afternoon. My name is Peter Van Loan, and I'm with the law firm of Berlis. I act for Prica Global Enterprises. We have a full submission that is attached at item 7.3 in the correspondence part of your agenda. It's a letter from Brandon Smith of the Planning Partnership. Now, Prica are the owners of lands within the Research and Technology Major Transit Station area. You can see it on this slide above. The Major Transit Station area has basically two key neighborhoods, two distinct neighborhoods. On one side of the tracks, let's call it the west side of the tracks, there's the David Johnson Research and Technology Park, and that is essentially a business park. On the east side of the tracks, more fine-grained mixed-use area. It links up with the community area to the east. It's active in terms of the uses to the south, which are largely related. And of course, the long-term vision for this area is a mix of urban uses, active in the evenings with residential and student life. Now, Prica is uniquely positioned to respond to the challenge of making this vision a reality. The one aspect of their operation is as a developer. They're in real estate development, design build, and residential rental housing provision with a strong relationship with the neighboring university community here. But there's also another side to Prica, which is the services company. It's involved in information technology, procurement services, marketing, and more. So as such, they understand very well the realities on the ground in this area, as well as its potential future possibilities for both jobs and homes. Now, the map shows the Prica lands outlined in red at 388 Phillips Street and 413 Albert Street. These are currently being proposed by staff to be designated regional employment area within the regional plan. Prica wishes to see a conversion so that the vision for a fine-grained, active mix of urban uses in this area has an opportunity to develop. An employment designation under the growth plan, which this would be, is generally intended for things like manufacturing, warehousing, space-extensive, low-density uses, sometimes for a business park, as you see on the other side of the tracks. But here, what we are dealing with on the east side of the tracks, it's essentially an isolated remnant. The lands on all sides of it have already been freed up to evolve into the kind of fine-grained mix of urban uses that we hope to see here. But by leaving this island in the middle, designated as employment, it's essentially tantamount to freezing that land and preventing its evolution into that mix of uses for perhaps more than a decade until the next municipal comprehensive review. What's worse, it stands as an impediment to that transformation taking place to the lands around it. Likely, it will remain underutilized or vacant for the foreseeable future over the next decade, limiting the attractiveness and potential for the other area lands. If this area is to succeed in becoming a fine-grained urban mixed-use area, for example, if we want it to be a dynamic place that attracts that mix of uses, which is the vision for it, roads, for example, would need to be established to break it into smaller parcels to make it a more pedestrian-friendly environment with pedestrian connections. That's not going to happen as long as the lands are frozen large parcel formation in the employment designation. Simply put, it will limit the potential. So there's a need to allow for some more comprehensive planning here of the dynamic evolution for transformation that could occur here. That's only going to happen if these lands are converted. The subject lands actually do meet the growth plan tests for conversion. In terms of need, there's a demonstrated need for residential housing and for the kind of mixed-use economic activity opportunities that this will create. One of the requirements is that the land no longer required for employment. Yes? This type of business park use has already relocated to the other side of the tracks. One has to assure that there is adequate employment land elsewhere. In fact, we know that's the case. It's being done well in this plan, and there are other better locations for the kind of uses this designation would provide. You also want to ensure that it won't undermine the viability of remaining employment. Here, there won't be any domino effect. Already, it's an isolated island, and there's certainly no question of land use compatibility with other remaining industrial uses. And finally, this takes advantage of the infrastructure that's existing and in place in this urban context. I'd observe that, in fact, you're probably going to end up with more jobs if the conversion takes place than if the employment designation remains in place and underutilized. Overall, this conversion, if permitted, will unlock the potential of this area and allow it to develop in the fashion that so many in Waterloo are saying that they want to see, to allow the community to reach its potential. It would be a community where people live close to where they work or go to school, where they can, both residents and workers, rely on the nearby major transit station area for higher order transit, where active transportation would become likely the leading mode of transportation for pedestrians in the area, where the physical infrastructure would be efficiently used, and where the social infrastructure could grow and develop. And finally, where the evolution of the next generation of dynamic economic activity could be released and allowed to develop to its potential. So we respectfully request that you help all of this become a reality and allow the conversion of this important parcel of land in this major transit station area to help it achieve its intended vision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Van Loan. Okay, moving on to our next delegation, that's Matthew Cory. Mr. Cory, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And to you and council and the public, my name is Matthew Cory, planning firm Malone, Given, Parsons, and I'm here on behalf of Schlegel Development in Kitchener. What I would like to share with you today is a presentation that has basically three main components, not dissimilar in some regards to Mr. Britton's presentation. First is some discussion on the land needs assessment methodology and the technical work before you. And then going into that is some observations, and then finally a recommendation or a request for settlement and boundary expansion. So with that, some observations first and foremost. We still have significant concerns with the work that regional staff have done. I think staff have done a tremendous amount of work, unlike in June, where we had very little opportunity to review that work. We've now had a chance to do a bit of a deeper dive. We're still of the perspective that the proposed housing mix represents a significant deviation from market demand. And the issue with that, quite simply, is that the population that will be housed will not be the one that everyone expects. It will be something completely different with the housing that's offered instead of what would be for a market demand. And that manifests in ignoring market demand to pursue unrealistic levels of intensification and high density housing doesn't meet the needs or wants of residents, including future residents and the forecasted residents, and undermines the achievement of the growth plan. We're also concerned that the shift in housing propensities is not based on sound evidence and will result in a housing mix that only provides options for singles, couples, and seniors, and not really many options for new families to come to the region. And lastly, there's some significant concerns we have with the method and how it was performed, and that may not conform to the growth plan, as some of it is not based on the prescribed land needs assessment from the province and wouldn't comply with that methodology, in our opinion. Just as a highlight, one of the major notes we've had a chance to look at, when you look at intensification rates, forecasting something around 61%. When you prorate the intensification rate in terms of what actually happened in the region, we believe it's closer to 42% that was achieved if you factor in the growth that did not occur that was forecasted in the greenfields alongside of the intensification. And that's important because there has to be a balanced perspective on intensification and setting a rate that allows opportunity for all housing forms, not just the ones from intensification. With regards to the land supply, we've done a very deep dive into the greenfield land supply and looked at that comparatively. We believe that the region's work overestimates the amount of vacant land by 584 hectares. This is a very significantly large number. That would mean in Kitchener alone, at least 182 hectares have been overestimated as vacant and available to accommodate growth. There's a number of reasons for this, both in terms of the nature of the land that has been put forward, as well as the methodology only taking us up to 2019 and failing to account for growth happening in the last 2-3 years. That's a significant issue in terms of the region believing it has more land to accommodate growth than it does. We had done a land needs assessment, which we're going to put in, we have already put a technical submission in, concluding that it's our opinion that the region needs about 944 hectares. And certainly in the city of Kitchener itself, we believe there's a requirement for at least around 366 hectares. But in particular, there's about 240 hectares that could be and should be brought in to meet growth needs. So our request, prior to taking us back to committee,
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, is that a medium density scenario that focuses on the medium density type housing that families want and need be used as a basis for going forward. That the amount of land need be accurately assessed, including corrections to the amount of vacant land supply to correct for that. And the remaining lands that are not part of the protected countryside and that are a logical, optimal location in southwest Kitchener be brought in to the tune of around 240 hectares. The lands in question, Mr. Britton spoke earlier on the lands in this location, just east of Fisher-Hallman Road. There's also another location which represents the conclusion of that settlement area. And on the very last point, Mr. Chair, the inclusion of these lands would represent something like 2 or a 3% increase in the overall settlement area to the region to 2051. That is to accommodate a 50% increase in the population in that time. Adding 2 or 3% of land to the urban area to accommodate 50% population is by no measure, or by anybody who's reasonable or being fair, sprawl of any kind, and least it's not sprawl in any way, especially given that the form of housing that's being developed now in these new suburbs is predominantly medium density. It's a lot more dense than in the past, and certainly Schlegel is very committed to doing complete communities, 15-minute communities, and that's what they can and will deliver in these areas. So with that, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate the time, and we will be putting in a technical submission, both on Schlegel's specific ask as well as the technical side of this as part of the comment on this whole MCR. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cory. We'll move on to the next delegation. That's Clarke Walker. Mr. Walker, are you okay? Mr. Walker, you're in the room. There you are. Yes.
Oh, very
Welcome.
good. Chair Galloway, councillors, and regional staff. My name is Clarke Walker, and I'm here to ask that you reconsider our request to have our property at 2117 Lonsdale Road in Woolwich Township included as employment lands in the ROP. Our 24-hectare property is located right beside Conestoga Meats. Conestoga is on 2 sides of our property, and Lonsdale Road is on the other 2 sides. We are directly across the road from the future airport terminal site. I would like to ask the following question. The region, through Tom Penwarden, the manager of real estate services, was spearheading an effort in early 2021 under the threat of expropriation to have our property or a portion of our property designated employment for the expansion of Conestoga Meats. If the region was willing to have our property designated employment lands for Conestoga Meats, why is it not employment lands for our company, House of Walker? I would like to provide you with some background information. In October 2019, our planner, Sam Head, sent a letter to Alyssa Bridge, the supervisor of ROP review, with a request to have her property designated as industrial. In the letter, it states, my client would like to have his property designated as industrial so that the possibility exists for Conestoga meat packers to expand their current operation. An industrial designation would also open the door for future industrial lands abutting the airport. I understand the new word for industrial is now employment. 14 months later, in early 2021, I was contacted by the region through Tom Penwarden that the region wanted to purchase our property for the expansion of Conestoga Meats and the expansion of the airport. The price would be based on an agricultural appraisal. I told him numerous times that I did not want to sell the property for an agricultural price and that I was waiting for an answer to a request of our property designated employment in the ROP. I was then told the region had another way to buy property, and that was through expropriation. I knew the region was serious about expropriating our property when they sent me a document titled Tax Treatment of Expropriated Property. I then sent an email to Tom Penwarden containing my thoughts that expropriating now was not fair and was very self-serving for Conestoga Meats in the region, as they were attempting to purchase our property for employment purposes at agricultural prices. 3.5 months later, on June the 17th, 2021, I received an email from Tom Penwarden stating, after consideration by both senior management and council, I can advise that the region will no longer be pursuing acquisition of your lands, either for airport or Conestoga meat packers expansion purposes. I was relieved on multiple fronts when I received this response. First, the region of Waterloo did not need our property for airport expansion. Two, Conestoga meat packers did not need our property for expansion purposes. Saying this, I've been contacted 3 times in the last year by Conestoga, still wanting to purchase our property, with the most recent call on April 21st. Third, our property would not be expropriated based on an agricultural appraisal. Fourth, it was my opinion that it would now be extremely difficult for the region to deny me employment status when they were willing to designate our property as employment for Conestoga Meats. We were very encouraged when we saw the June 6, 2022 Woolwich Township report recommending that our property be designated employment. I was recently informed that my property is 20 years away from receiving municipal services. I disagree. I think it's less than 5 years. 1 minute. Here is why. Zoning bylaw 43-2016, section 26.1.32 regarding Conestoga states, Conestoga Meats is to remain zoned agricultural until they are connected to municipal sanitary. The Conestoga plant cannot exceed 350,000 square feet until they are connected to municipal sanitary. I estimate the plant is currently 350,000 square feet plus or minus. Allowing them to finish their expansion to 450,000 square feet would be in conflict with the zoning bylaw. Based on this bylaw, Conestoga Meats to be connected to the municipal sanitary now, so they can begin their plant expansion. Conestoga Meats is located on the corner of Menno Street and Lonsdale Road. When the municipal sanitary reaches this corner, our property will be less than 1,000 feet away. This is why I say municipal sanitary is less than 5 years away and is not a reason to exclude my property. In closing, the region was willing to have our property or a portion of our property designated employment lands for Conestoga Meats. Why is it not employment lands for our company, House of Walker? I am requesting that my 24-hectare property at 2117 Lonsdale be designated as employment lands in the ROP. Thank you for your time and for listening to my request.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walker. Carry on to our next delegation, Vladimir Voznyuk. Is Mr. Voznyuk in the waiting room? Possibly not. Okay, we'll circle back to Mr. Voznyuk if he does join us later on. The next delegation then is Sam Nabi. Sam, you're there? Yes, you are. Welcome, Sam.
Hello, welcome. Thank you, Chair Galloway, Mayors, Member of Regional Council. I'm here representing Hold the Line Waterloo Region. Let me just share my screen. Okay, can we all see my screen?
We see it.
Perfect. So as I said, I'm here representing Hold the Line Waterloo Region. I'd just like to take a bit of a step back and re-emphasize that this regional planning process, we're talking a lot about land and we're talking a lot about boundaries, but it really starts with planning for growth. We're going to be welcoming many, many new neighbors and new jobs from now till 2051. And the question is how to welcome those new additions to our community. So I'm really pleased to see staff's thoughtful approach to this recommendation, 150 hectares of community area expansion and a smaller than anticipated employment area expansion. This is something that we've had a lot of conversations about, and that is a balanced and efficient approach for growth in our region. Our countryside is a non-renewable resource. Once those farms disappear, once those areas for our rural agricultural economy disappear, we do not get them back. And on the other side of the coin, we have areas within our urban boundary that we can make the most of. This photo on the bottom is Strasbourg Road in Kitchener, and there's a lot of employment uses in that area. There are also a lot of large parking lots, a lot of vacant lots, as you can see by the photo in front of you. We can add much more employment density. We can add much more residential density to create complete communities across the region, not just in our downtown cores. I'd like to skip over to the Southwest Kitchener area for a moment. This map was released as part of a City of Kitchener staff report as part of the City of Kitchener's recommendations during this process a couple of weeks ago. And it looks like the proposed new countryside line has been determined in this area, which Hold the Line accepts as a result of the process that was laid out by the Ontario Municipal Board. We're also pleased to see that on the rural side of this line, that it has been hatched as protected countryside. I think it's really important not just to have the countryside line, but also to have the protections for the actual lands behind it, so that we can protect this area, which is an essential groundwater recharge zone, part of the Waterloo moraine, and very important for maintaining that balance. I just want to respond directly to Mr. Britton, who presented earlier today, had concerns, MHBC had concerns that have since been addressed by regional staff in their updated recommendations about lands that are available for development or not available for development. The 150 hectares is appropriate, and I believe, and Hold the Line agrees, will meet our needs for the foreseeable future and plan for growth until 2051. These lands can remain rural. These lands can remain prime agricultural, and that is appropriate. These lands, even if approved for a subdivision, may not be coming online until 2040. So when we're thinking about solving the housing crisis, thinking about increasing supply, we need to be thinking about intensification, not developing in the furthest corner of Kitchener. Mr. Britton also mentioned that this new neighborhood he's proposing would be walking distance from the new transit hub. I took a look at that map, and it's 1 to 2 kilometers from the transit hub to the neighborhoods that may be built here. I think that's a stretch to call that walkable. Also, a presentation earlier today from Mr. Cory, representing Schlegel, said that the housing mix would not meet family needs and would only meet seniors and single people and couples. I take issue with that as well. I think the regional staff have done an excellent job at making a variety of housing forms and a variety of housing choice available across our region in 15-minute communities. And part of that is bedroom policies, part of that is affordability policies. And these are new parts of the regional official plan that are going to apply everywhere to ensure that when we build condos, when we build townhouses, when we build new forms of housing, they do accommodate families as well. We can plan to make sure that we have enough 3-bedroom units, and also that those places are close to childcare or that are close to schools, and that parents don't have to be driving their kids everywhere. So I realize my time is up. I'll leave it there for now, but I would welcome any of your questions and just reiterate Hold the Line's support for this recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, Chair. Just a really quick comment. Sam, you said 1 to 2 kilometers, and you didn't think that was within walking distance. Is the distance 5 minutes or 15 minutes? Chair, do you know which it is? Is it a 15 minutes is walking? Sam, just a point, and I'm not arguing with anything you say, just saying that I get on my treadmill and it marks me, and I can do 10 minutes, a kilometer in 10 minutes, and I'm a right leg amputee. Of course, that's holding on, but I just want to say, so it could be walking distance. Thank you.
Okay. No other questions then. The next delegation is Mr. Mark Flowers. Mr. Flowers, there you are. Thank you. Welcome.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Mark Flowers. I'm a lawyer with Davies Howe and I represent Schlegel Urban Developments Corp. In relation to the matter before committee this afternoon, Schlegel has 2 properties in southwest Kitchener. The first is approximately 59 hectares. It's north of New Dundee Road, east of Fisher-Holman Road, within the area known as the Southwest Kitchener Policy Area, otherwise known as the SCIPA lands. The second property is approximately 58 hectares between Bleems Road and Huron Road, west of Fisher-Holman Road, known as the BSF2 lands. And given the limited time available and the fact that other deputants have already spoken more broadly to the SCIPA lands, I'm going to focus my remarks on the BSF2 lands. Another reason why it's important for me to focus on the BSF2 lands is that they've been largely ignored by regional staff throughout this process. By way of background, when the regional official plan, the current regional official plan, was before the then Ontario Municipal Board in 2015, Schlegel became involved in that process. And as a result of a settlement between Schlegel and the region, which was subsequently endorsed by the OMB, the BSF2 lands were not designated as protected countryside in the region's official plan. That fact is very important, as the regional official plan identifies the countryside line as being permanent only where it coincides with the protected countryside designation. In other words, that policy does not apply to the BSF2 lands, and accordingly, the countryside line is not considered permanent in this location. Rather, it can be adjusted to accommodate a settlement boundary expansion. However, fast forward now to June 2020, when regional staff hosted a webinar for the current official plan review, during which they identified lands within the region where settlement expansions could potentially occur, depending on the outcome of the subsequent land needs analysis. And although the SCIPA lands were identified as an area for potential urban expansion at that time, the BSF2 lands were not. Shortly thereafter, Schlegel wrote to regional staff explaining why the BSF2 lands could, and indeed should be considered as an ideal candidate for a settlement boundary expansion. Among other things, the BSF2 lands are directly adjacent to the existing urban area. They have surrounding lands that are currently under construction for residential development. There is servicing infrastructure literally at the property's doorstep. There are road and active transportation connections already contemplated, linking development lands both to the north and east of the BSF2 lands. And as you've heard, there's been discussion about establishing complete communities. These lands could be certainly easily integrated with the lands surrounding within the Rosenberg secondary plan to establish a complete community. Despite these attributes, regional staff pointed to official plan policy as a basis for failing to give proper consideration to the BSF2 lands as a candidate for urban expansion as part of this exercise. And in response, Schlegel and its planning consultants reached out to regional staff earlier this year to schedule a pre-application consultation meeting to discuss a proposed regional official plan amendment application for the BSF2 land specifically, and that meeting ultimately occurred in early April. Now, to be clear, we do not believe that an official plan amendment application initiated by Schlegel was or is necessary. Rather, it was proposed solely in response to staff pointing to existing policy in the region's official plan as the basis for not including the BSF2 lands as a potential expansion area, and accordingly ensuring there could be no dispute that regional council had the ability to include the BSF2 lands in a potential settlement expansion. Now, in my experience, it typically takes about 3 or 4 weeks potentially after a pre-application consultation meeting for municipal staff to respond with initial feedback and a list of required information to be provided with an application. In this case, however, Schlegel received no response from regional staff.
1 minute, Mr. Flowers, 1 minute.
Thank you. From the pre-application consultation meeting for over 3.5 months, only received a response yesterday, literally just hours before this public meeting. And notably, in their comments just received, regional staff have stated that the proposed official plan amendment to modify the countryside line adjacent to the BSF2 lands is, and I quote, more appropriately considered through the ongoing regional official plan review and municipal comprehensive review, or MCR. And of course, that's the very process we're in right now. In other words, staff finally seem to acknowledge that regional council can revise the countryside line adjacent to the BSF2 lands to include these lands within a settlement boundary expansion. You've heard from previous deputants, including Mr. Cory, that it's been determined that the region needs to add approximately 950 hectares of additional community area land to accommodate the region's population growth to 2051 and to provide a balanced mix of housing opportunities. So in conclusion, on behalf of Schlegel, we submit that a portion of that urban expansion should occur in Southwest Kitchener, and we request that such expansion include both the SCIPA lands and the BSF2 lands. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Flowers. The next delegation is Alexandra Shaflarska. Alexandra, welcome.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the staff, the mayors, and the councillors for continuing to work on this process, for your continuing openness to input. We really value that. As my note and my line in the agenda states, I'm here on behalf of Hold the Line along with Sam Nabi. I won't reiterate everything he said, but I also learned today that I'm here representing the median resident of Waterloo Region at 38 years old. So that's another nice little hat I wear. I want to repeat what Sam said, that Hold the Line is in favor of ensuring that we move quickly to support this amendment. We've heard that from many other delegations and citizens as well. We do not believe that costly delays are warranted on this, especially since there is clear broad support, as we've read in the record, heard from councillors, heard from the public, for supporting the countryside line and for sustainable smart development in Waterloo Region, including smart transit, better transit, and a more equitable region for all. We are glad to see and want to see more of clear and deep protection for the countryside and recharge zone at the quickly changing Southwest Kitchener area. I wanted to re-stress this because Sam did mention to it, and several of the delegations from developers here are putting pressure on that area, and we would like to see that protected, and appreciate that staff has put effort into making that clear in this amendment. We also appreciate sincere, meaningful consultation with Six Nations elected council, Mississaugas of the Credit, along with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Chiefs and the Haudenosaunee Development Institute. Again, happy to see that highlighted in the amendment, and appreciate seeing more of that kind of deep and meaningful consultation. We know our region is growing. We're not blind to that. I'm part of that growth, having moved here several years ago. And we believe that this amendment accommodates that. We've shown vision before, as Kevin Eby has pointed out, with the 2009 ROP process, something that so many of our people here in Waterloo Region point to with pride. And we would love to see this council show that same kind of leadership and vision. You have our support to do so. We can protect the countryside line, our water, prioritize those complete 15-minute communities that everyone keeps talking about and valuing, build missing, middle, and affordable housing that we so desperately need, and build a world-class Waterloo Region all at the same time. We look forward to next steps, continuing to engage with council and with the public in this process. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. Okay, the next delegation is Mr. Fred Wagner. Mr. Wagner, are you with us? Okay, yes. There you are. And Mr. Wagner, we have you down as the Waterloo Federation of Agriculture. Are you, I don't believe you're representing them today. You're representing yourself. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chairman Galloway. Good afternoon. I'm Fred Wagner. I am a local farmer. I produce crops in Kitchener and in Woolwich Township. And I have been, and I still am, a member of the Waterloo Federation of Agriculture for over 40 years now. And I have been a board member for 34 years with this organization. And also, I've been very active on many agricultural organizations on provincial boards in the past 3 decades. Prime agricultural land is on everybody's mind. Very little of land in South Kitchener can be called prime ag land. Sandhills with relative thin topsoil cover is not prime. This year, with the ongoing below normal precipitation, it is quite obvious. Please do me a favor. Drive out on Fisher Holman or New Dundee Road and you will see the disastrous crops. I have 150 acres in the south end of Kitchener and watch it wither away. after spending the highest input costs ever per acre, especially on fertilizer and fuel. It basically doubled over last year. My township lands are holding up much better because of deeper topsoil and better soil types. Please protect farmland in the townships where there are prosperous farms worth protecting. There are no viable farms or family farms, as everybody calls them, in the city of Kitchener anymore. Why do we have a rural designated land in the city? Townships are rural, cities are not. We farmers hate to inconvenience city folks with our equipment on city streets. Old rules served us well. It said development should go where development exists. Infrastructure is present and can easily be expanded. We have many examples in our region where costly mistakes have been made, and our regional tax burden is steadily going up. Because of that, I am very much for infilling and redevelopment of areas not serving its intended use wherever possible. But please, save farmland and family farms in the township and not in the city. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wagner. We're going to listen to or hear from two more delegations, and then I'm going to call for a break because there'll be another 10 or 12 after that, so we might as well have our break now, because rather than have a break with only a few delegations left. So we'll go to our next delegation. That's Mr. Bob Finnegan.
Good day. I can't seem to get my video going because the host has stopped it. So
we hear you, Mr. Finnegan, and now we see you. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Hi, my name is Bob Finnegan, and I'm president of Heathwood Homes. We've been building homes in Southern Ontario for over 30 years, and since 2018 have been a builder in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. In addition to my role at Heathwood, I've been very fortunate to serve as president of the Toronto Home Builders Association, the Ontario Home Builders Association, and most recently as president of the Canadian Home Builders Association. I've also been very immersed in the present discussions across the country and around the province, how to best address the housing supply challenges facing our province and indeed our country. Waterloo region is a truly unique and wonderful place, extremely well located and accessible via the major highways, GO Transit, with its universities. Both my daughters attended here, high-tech industries, and a myriad of other attractions. It'll be a growth center for generations to come. And we truly want to contribute to this region for many years to come. Waterloo region is, of course, identified provincially as a place to grow. Since the introduction of the Provincial Growth Plan in 2006 and the parameters that is set for growth and housing densities throughout, we have seen a quantum leap in the type of housing offered to the new home buyer in the urban markets of Southern Ontario. Whereas in the previous 50 years, we have seen the predominant form of housing being developed was a single-family housing on large lots. The last 20 years have seen a rapid change to the market offerings of today, where only 30% of the new home sales are single-family. In large urban areas like the Waterloo region, we've seen growth in the downtown high-rise condominium market, but also a very notable and large and pronounced shift to medium density, stacked townhomes, back-to-back townhomes, street-fronting townhomes in all new developments. And this form of housing is identified as the missing middle housing form. The single-family offerings have also changed dramatically too, with the new norm being much smaller development lots. Today, we get many more homes per acre than we did just a decade ago, and the expansive subdivisions of 20 years ago are not the compact, sustainable 15-minute neighborhoods that are being approved today. During this period of time, the towns, cities, and regions adjusted their official plans to conform to the provincial standards, and we've seen the supply of readily available ground-oriented housing tighten to the point where now throughout the GGH, a very real shortage of ground-oriented housing supply is there, and this adversely affects housing choice and affordability going forward. At Heathwood, since we opened our site in Southwest Kitchener, we have welcomed over 500 families. Many of these people were not from the Waterloo region, but rather from the western end of the GTA, Milton, Brampton, Georgetown, that could not find suitable and affordable housing for their families and themselves in those markets. So they simply drove so they could afford. While many commute, with the changes in how we do business in the post-COVID era, these people have been able to live, play, and work from home. They are strong contributors to the local economy, and their future lives will become more entwined in the Waterloo region over the years. They would not have made the move to Kitchener to live in a high-rise. High-rise affordability is due strictly to the size of the unit, 600 to 800 square feet. If our industry were to build 3-bedroom condominium units, they would be unaffordable. Our purchasers wanted a new integrated master planned 15-minute style community of mixed housing types that would give them the opportunity to put down roots, call the region home. Once they purchased, many called friends and families to let them know that how great a place Kitchener is, and they followed. I would suggest strongly that this is a norm for many, many of the new homeowners in the region. To that end, there must be an adequate supply of new ground-oriented housing that will meet market demand and complement the intensification that is prudent and needed along the transit and transportation corridors. Also, the homes that we are building are built to the newest and best standards of sustainability. Heathwood has long been recognized as a leader in energy efficiency in homes. Our homes are currently consistently 25% better than the OBC in their energy efficiency through increased insulation, building techniques.
1 minute, Mr. Finnegan. Thank you.
Yep. We offer ready for solar homes that will allow homeowners to install roof panels whenever they want without renovations being needed. All homes also have rough-ins for EV chargers, battery storage areas, and have gray water systems to allow bath and shower drain water to be used in toilets, saving up to 30% of the home's water usage. There is absolutely no doubt that a variety of housing choice is key to a healthy, vibrant, growing community. It's also key to keeping the local economy prosperous for years to come, so that children can find a place to call home alongside their parents and friends down the road. A healthy mix of new ground-oriented developments throughout the region, with the initiatives to revitalize, along with the initiatives to revitalize the urban corridors and nodes, will ensure that this becomes a reality in the future. We at Heathwood are concerned about the Waterloo region LNA before you, and respectively suggest that its restrictive plans to accommodate housing choice to 2051 fall short of the provincial targets and fall well short of addressing the systemic housing supply challenge before the province and indeed Canada. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Finnegan. We'll move on to our last delegation before we're going to take a 10-minute break. And that's Mr. Greg Mikolenko. Welcome, Greg.
Hello, I represent the Grand River Environmental Network. GREN, as we call it, supports the proposed amendments and recognizes the need for timely approval and submission to the provincial government. It's a thoroughly professional and progressive document taking matters such as land conservation, climate change, community-wide housing needs, and shifting demographic patterns into account. It also respects the range of community concerns and interests gained through the review process. We thank regional staff for their good work and councillors for their careful and respectful consideration. We share the concerns expressed by many other community-centered delegations on this issue. I myself have considerable experience from participating in the revision process for several sections of the previous regional official plan a decade ago. After thorough internal professional work by regional officials and extensive consultation, it was the first ROP in the province approved by the municipal council and sent to the provincial government. It was an excellent document. The new provincial mandate to allocate a minimum of 45% of growth to within current municipal boundaries was not only met but exceeded. However, it became lodged at the provincial level because the Ministry of Natural Resources was unhappy with one section, which provided badly needed enhanced municipal regulation of aggregate mining because of the crucial need to safeguard the groundwater supply of the region. That matter was eventually cleared up. But then a group of some 24 unhappy land speculators and developers undertook a challenge before the Ontario Municipal Board. Their private profits were obviously at stake. This unpleasant and unnecessary dispute cost the region millions of dollars in legal expenses, delayed implementation of the ROP, and led the province to introduce extensive reforms to the defective Ontario Municipal Board. There is now concern that some private interests are once again determined to delay the timely approval of the ROC. We've seen that with some of the representations today, so that they may cash in on more of their own speculative land holdings. We ask you to resist sacrificing community and region interests to such actions. This is a good ROC and should be approved in its present form now. Please avoid delays and please maintain the countryside line, including that in Southwest Kitchener. We have an additional concern. Conservation of farmland and the health of the rural landscape is one of Gren's main concerns. We are happy that there will be minimum new intrusions into agricultural land under this ROC. On the other hand, we are very concerned about the huge amount of land being sacrificed for gravel extraction under provincial regulations. I'll hold this up, and no, that's just a map of a portion of North Dumfries. Those light yellow spots are all aggregate licenses. We had made a submission to the Ecological and Environmental Advisory Committee regarding concerns of one of the new licenses abutting on Alps Woods. Through our analysis, we found that in this 52 square kilometer block of North Dumfries alone that's on that map, 1,430 hectares, or 23% of land, is licensed for aggregate extraction under 32 different permits. In the worst case, between Cedar Creek and Alps Road, a 5.9 kilometer long continuous stretch of 11 permits will result in the loss of 62% of the land in that beautiful agricultural area. In view of this devastation, we feel that there is an enhanced moral imperative to be as frugal as possible in our region in allocating farmland for residential growth and employment land. This ROC does recognize this need, and you have our back.
Okay, thanks very much, Greg. And now we'll have a 10-minute break, and so we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, and we'll carry on with the delegations. The next of those will be Mr. Don Given. Mr. Given.
Gentlemen, members of the committee, thank you for having me. I don't intend to go over other materials that were presented by other planners, but I think, as you'll recall, I have been retained by Schlegel. And I want to make just a few points, and I will submit this in written form to you for your staff to review. As a planner who's worked in this business over 50 years, I've always found that one of the public interest issues that we always have to wrestle with is to make sure that there's a sufficient supply of housing so that prices are not driven up by shortages in land supply. And the provinces recognize that in their growth plan, where they have acknowledged that there has to be a market-based approach to providing housing supply. And when I look at what the province provided to all municipalities as a report, a technical report, about a year ago in 2020, August of 2020, what was considered to be a market supply of housing for each of the regions and each of the cities. And in this particular case in Waterloo, they were recommending approximately 90,000 singles, semis, and townhouses for Waterloo to take you out to 2051. The reason we are concerned as personally and as an industry is that that's totally different than what you're being asked to approve. And there has to be a reconciliation on those numbers, because I think if you're heading down the path that's ahead of you, that staff is pointing at, you're going to find that you will be constraining the supply of land unnecessarily. People will be moving to other communities to find the type of housing we're talking about. The second thing I'd like to point out is that staff have said that you will be achieving the missing middle intensification. The missing middle is a term that has been coined to use how we could open up lands in what is called the yellow belt in some places for other forms of housing that would be intensification. But it is also a type of housing form that is ground related, that suits family. It's ground access that suits family. And you heard Mr. Finnegan talking about that's the type of product that they're building more frequently than they used to. That's what we're talking about here, is that the family style of housing, I think that you're looking for, is best found in the greenfields, because it's less expensive to develop. It's more complete in terms of communities. And I think it's more readily and easily built, as opposed to holding out and hoping that it comes to intensification. My only other point that I'd ask you to consider in this, Mr. Chairman, is that you're being advised that if your staff don't get this right, you can review it in 5 years. That's just pushing off a problem and delaying things. What I think you need to look at in terms of what the 5-year delay would cause you is you'd have to restart another municipal comprehensive review, do some catch up in terms of opening up lands through designations at the regional level and at the local level, and then to get into all of the technical studies that are required to open up the lands that revolve around transportation, groundwater protection, stormwater management, housing forms, etc. All of that, in my experience, as I said, which is considerable, takes at least 15 to 20 years to implement under the rules of the growth plan today and under the policies of the municipalities. So in pushing it off for 5 years, you're really pushing it right to the very outer limit of the 2051 or the 2051 horizon that this growth plan is intended to achieve growth in. So I'd ask you to look at and question what the staff are asking you to do when they say they can't open.
Mr. Gibbon, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. When they're asking you to think about pushing this off for another 5 years, I heard a very different answer from other members of the staff at the region who don't agree with that. And I'd like to leave it with you to find out what the implications would be of doing that, how long it would take to open up the plan and review it again in 5 years. I don't think it's necessary. I think all of that can be dealt with through phasing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gibbon. The next delegation is Pierre Chauvin. Mr. Chauvin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Pierre Chauvin. I'm with MHBC Planning out of Kitchener. Just going to share my screen briefly. I think you can see that. Let me know if you can't.
Yes, we can, Pierre, yeah.
Thank you. So I'm here on behalf of one owner who under 3 different company names, which is Snyder's Road Development, Baden, who on the screen owns the red area just north of Baden. Outlined in red. Outlined in blue is also lands they owned under the ownership of Struma Developments, Baden Southeast Incorporated, and in orange as well to the west of Baden, south of Snyder's Road, Struma Developments, Baden Southwest Inc. In total, they have over 100 hectares of land. As you can see, all their lands are generally contiguous with the existing Baden settlement area. And in fact, the lands that they own north of Baden, in the outline in red, are proposed through the region's ongoing wastewater master plan for the extension of sanitary service to service the Foxborough Green development. And the regional staff are looking for easements through our clients' lands to service Foxborough. I'm here in support of the regional staff recommendation of one of the community area expansion areas identified as CA18, and the staff report identified here in purple, which covers about half of the Struma lands in Baden. We certainly support that recommendation, but we would also recommend and go further and say that if there's any expansion in Wilmot Township, all community area expansions should be on one of our clients' parcels. This opinion recognizes a number of considerations. One relates to the easements and servicing of Foxborough, which I previously mentioned. These lands, their lands are all contiguous with the Baden settlement area and will contribute to the walkable community. The lands are all serviceable by existing and planned infrastructure that is underway. You can see we're well located relative to community infrastructure, such as the Waterloo Oxford District Secondary School, the Sir Adam Public School, as well as existing and future schools that are planned within the settlement area of Baden, not to mention the core area of Baden itself, which is all very walkable. From a walkability perspective, we're adjacent to the Beckdale Trail, which runs along the CNR rail line. We have contributed to the extension of that trail. We have road extensions within the existing settlement area that provide existing road access and servicing access. We're well connected, as you can see, to existing collector roads, Snyder's Road, Highway 7, and close proximity, the Wilmot Recreational Complex within not too far away, as well as the future employment lands within New Hamburg. All saying, I'm repeating all the similar things that you've heard in other situations where all these issues contribute to providing a complete community and a walkable community. So I would suggest that not only we support the staff recommendation, but we go on further to say that any further expansion should be on our clients' lands. All expansion should be on our clients' lands. So those would be my submissions, and we have made written submissions previously to staff, and we continue to look forward to working with regional staff to hopefully come to a acceptable resolution on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chauvin. Councillor Foxton.
Sorry, Chair, I keep bugging you. Mr. Chauvin, are those the lands that were under the minister's zoning order before?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, they're not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next delegation is Mr. Hal Yeager. Mr. Yeager. Mr. Yeager is here, correct?
Good day.
Okay, we hear you.
Thank you. Respected Chair and members of Council, I did bring a video, so let's see if that will go up here.
Okay, there you are. Okay.
All right. I'm not quite seeing it myself, but I'm going to trust also that I had a slide deck that I'm hoping would also be shown by staff.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So, respected Chair and members of Council, my name is Hal Yeager, and I live in central Kitchener in a neighborhood called Old Berlin Town. I ask you to please continue to endorse the growth plan option that's set out by regional staff and to not defer the decision. Slide, please. Before you is the resolution passed by Kitchener Council on the growth options. I'd like to share with you my concerns with the highlighted portions. Slide, please. Whereas Kitchener acknowledges we are in a housing affordability crisis, of course, is there one among us unconcerned with housing affordability? Slide, please. I believe these next three assertions, which argue that we are underhoused relative to other G7 countries, are misleading. It is not enough to compare populations versus housing. As Professor Brian Doucette explains, we need to compare households versus housing. And we need to consider the number and age of children per household. Because of our larger average household size, we need less dwellings than other G7 countries. And on a per capita basis, we need the second least dwellings of all the provinces. Slide, please. As to the appeal to the CMHC statement, the resolution conflates housing supply with land supply. Staff have demonstrated that we have no shortage of developable land and assert that increasing the land supply will not reduce housing costs. Slide, please. The resolution then calls on the region to increase the growth target. But the region's long-term population housing growth analysis already accounts for the worst-case projected population by 2051. Increasing the forecasted population would violate the land needs assessment methodology prescribed by the province. Slide, please. The resolution then veers in directions unrelated to the crisis and seek goals that may increase the cost to the city of delivering services and thus make it harder for the city to address the affordable housing crisis. Slide, please. In the end, what we all continue to agree upon is that we have an affordable crisis. Slide, please. In conclusion, as demonstrated, the identified sections of the Kitchener Council resolution are based on faulty premises, deny the evidence produced by staff, ask the region to violate a provincial directive without due cause, seek support for potentially inefficient expansions unrelated to the identified problem, and do not address factors that contribute to our affordable housing crisis. Please do not be swayed by the misleading arguments. Please continue endorsing the growth plan options set out by regional staff. And please do not defer the decision. A deferral could lead to the province making the decision on our behalf, undercutting our self-determination. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yeager. And we'll move on then to Mr. Robert Howe. Mr. Howe, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of committee. My name is Robert Howe, and I'm a lawyer representing landowners in Southwest Kitchener, namely Activa Holdings, Inc. and Granby Investments, Inc. I've submitted a letter dated today, which I would respectfully request that you review. My clients both owned lands in the Southwest Kitchener policy area, otherwise known as the SKIPA, and there are aspects of the draft ROPA that my clients do support. For example, it confirms that based on the technical work our clients have done, the tests have been satisfied to include these lands as within the countryside line. In other words, they are not within the protected countryside. However, our clients continue to be concerned about the urban area boundary expansions proposed by the ROPA. And we submit that the urban area boundary needs to be larger than is proposed by the draft ROPA, and that we believe an expansion is warranted in Southwest Kitchener, and that the Activa and Granby lands should be included in the urban area boundary and not designated prime agricultural area as proposed. As we've indicated in past submissions, we believe that the land needs assessment prepared by the region staff and consultants substantially underestimates the need for land required in the DGA to accommodate growth to 2051. We provided detailed comments regarding the ways in which we have determined that the land needs assessment prepared by the region doesn't conform to the provincial methodology, and those concerns remain. We've also submitted a land needs assessment by Altus Group, does conform to the provincial methodology, that essentially reaches similar conclusions to those indicated by Mr. Cory in his submissions earlier this afternoon. I'm going to focus on the problem with the land needs assessment, and I would say it does look like an impressive document, but the problem is that to us, it's essentially a mathematical model that does not have sufficient regard for the true demand for housing based on your future population and the housing that can actually be accommodated on lands within the region in the designated greenfield area. And I'm going to focus on one of the most significant issues that we have raised. The provincial methodology requires that a land needs assessment be based on an actual inventory of the housing that can be accommodated in your existing designated greenfield area. So you first have to determine your demand for housing, and then you compare that demand to the housing that can actually be built based on the actual vacant land that's available and based on existing planning approvals. The region's land needs assessment ignored this requirement up until the addendum that was just recently released at the end of last month. And the problem, though, with the inventory that was released is that it is substantially incorrect. Our client's consultant, MHBC Planning, prepared a very detailed assessment of potential housing supply in the region's DGA on the actual vacant lands, based on reviewing planning permissions and pending applications on a parcel by parcel basis. They looked at every vacant parcel of land in the region's DGA to assess its unit potential. Based on that assessment, the region's estimates are way off in terms of low and medium density housing. In fact, the region overestimates the number of new low density units that can be accommodated on existing designated greenfield area lands by over 5,000 units, and overestimates medium density units by a similar amount. That's 10,000 low and medium density units that the region's analysis says are required in the designated greenfield area, but cannot be accommodated. Now, we expect that the region's consultants didn't do the kind of detailed analysis that MHBC did, and the discrepancy may at least in part have to do with the fact that the region's analysis assumed that significant amounts of land are vacant and available for development, which in fact have already been developed, as has been concluded by MHBC. Thank you, sir. I want to address one last point. Regional staff have suggested that regional council not be concerned regarding the DGA land supply, as there is a large amount of land in the DGA available for development today. The land needs assessment also relies on the fact that over 50% of new housing units have been developed in the BUA over the last few years. The implication is that the demand for housing in the DGA has been waning, and there isn't a market for DGA housing. What I would say to you is that even with a future intensification rate higher than 50%, a large amount of land in the DGA will be required to accommodate development over the next 30 years. There's also been a suggestion that landowners in the DGA have been sitting on their lands delaying development, and that's simply not true. Local municipalities have largely controlled the availability of DGA land for development through infrastructure decisions and through how they process and prioritize planning, approvals, and development applications. An analysis by MHBC confirmed that as of 2021, over 75% of the DGA was not available for development, either because it did not have required infrastructure or did not have required planning approvals. So in conclusion, our clients respectfully submit that the region will be making a serious mistake by relying on a land needs assessment that's based on a flawed methodology and does not plan for the sufficient housing that it will need to meet its growth to 2051. So we respectfully urge council to approve a larger urban area expansion that includes the Activa and Granby and Skippa lands in Southwest Kitchener.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Howe. The next delegation is Stephanie Gertz, Is Stephanie in the waiting room? It does not appear so. So we'll circle back to Stephanie maybe later. The next delegation then is Bobby Stewart. Welcome, Bobby.
Thank you very much. I was in my comfortable chair. I'm going to get into a higher chair here. There we go. Thank you. The name is Bobby Stewart. I'm a resident of Preston, Cambridge. I'm delighted to be here. I was going to just send my support via email. I have been following the whole situation and coming to meetings. June 29th, I was there. Bottom line is I wasn't going to delegate because I felt there were probably lots. However, I did get an invite. I believe some political nominees for regional council were invited by 50 by 30. So I gratefully appreciate that invitation, and I'm here. I'm president, but I am also seeking a position on regional council to represent Cambridge. I am really, really impressed by the work that's been done by staff, by council, all of the advocacy work that's been done by various groups, 50 by 30, Council of Canadians, Citizens for Safe Groundwater, NIF, Eco Boosters. I also really appreciate the comments and the information that we're getting from people like, former planners, and by the developers and their concerns that there may not be enough housing. But I do want to support this amendment. I read, option 8, 1, 2, 3, and now 4, and looking at the evolution. And again, each plan took over less farmland. And I think, like so many people have said, we have to stop somewhere. We have a client emergency. And we do have to find housing for people, but the methods that have been suggested, of course, with sustainable, walkable, 15-minute neighborhoods and middle housing and mixed housing and missing middle, filling that in. It's all been said, and I appreciate it, and I agree with it. And I think there is an urgency. I know there's been a lot of work done already on affordable housing in the region and regarding climate action. And my concern is if it's not a good idea to delay, that it's really, really important to move this very quickly and do it now. So I thank you so much. I'm honored to be here and very grateful. And thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Bobby. We'll move on then to Mr. Tom McLaughlin. Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. McLaughlin in the room? Okay, Mr. McLaughlin's not here. I just want to call for Mr. Vladimir Voznyuk. Okay, it's not coming. All right, the remaining delegations we have 4 listed delegations, and they will have 3 minutes. And, sorry, just hang on a minute. Okay, so the next delegation is for 3 minutes, and that's Mr. Mark Reeser.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Mark. Yeah.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Reeser. I farm in Wilmot Township near New Dundee. I am delegating today in my capacity as Vice President of the Waterloo Federation of Agriculture. Only 5% of Ontario's landmass has the suitable soils and climate to support agriculture and grow food. Yet we are losing 319 acres of farmland every day when it is converted to other uses like urbanization and utilization for aggregate extraction. That is a tragedy because farmland is a non-renewable natural resource. When it's paved over, it's lost forever. On the other hand, if one takes care of the soil, it is a perpetual resource in that it can potentially produce food forever. Indigenous people have grown corn, beans, and squash right here in Waterloo for over 1,000 years. We live in a special place here in Waterloo. It is arguably the most innovative, dynamic, prosperous municipality in Ontario, if not all of Canada. At the same time, surrounding the urban footprint is the most fertile, productive, and prosperous agricultural community in Ontario. Why is that? A culture of visionary planning, countryside lines, the protected countryside and environmentally sensitive landscape designations, and an innovative official plan that continues to push the boundaries have promoted and enabled both a thriving urban and a thriving rural community that are the envy of others nationwide. Our planning regime is responsible for our unique position as a leader in Ontario, and our new proposed official plan and accompanying land needs assessment are a template for good planning, farmland protection, sustainability, and prosperity in municipalities throughout Canada. Thank you to staff for your hard work in proposing that provides a desirable place to work, live, and play, and still preserves the land that sustains us. Thanks also to our elected representatives for supporting this plan that recognizes that we build a thriving, affordable community in a more compact form without resorting to sprawl. In conclusion, please pass this amendment without delay and without deferral. Continue to be an example for the province. Continue to improve and set the bar high. Be courageous as you make tough and difficult choices. Be bold, be visionary, don't be afraid to innovate, and never stop speaking forcefully and eloquently to those with resources and power. And finally, remember that there is only one landscape, and that people, the natural environment, and agriculture all have to share it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Okay, the next delegation is Ian McLean.
Well, good evening, and thank you, Chair Galloway, Chair Redmond, mayors, councillors, and regional staff. We spoke to you last on June 29th from my car at a conference, and on behalf of myself and Greg DeRocher in particular from the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, I speak to you again today. Our concerns remain, and the questions that we have don't appear to be answered yet, so I'll be brief. This plan is, I said before, this plan is not ready. It's not balanced, fair, and it won't meet the needs of our region as we grow to almost 1 million residents by 2051. This week, all of our colleagues at Best Waterloo, which is Communitech, Explore Waterloo, Waterloo EDC, and the two chambers sent a letter to the region with 4 questions, which we trust will be considered and answered before council moves ahead. Questions around talent attraction, employment lands, LNA work, and how this all impacts not only residential, but employment lands going into the future. We do need a regional official plan that has community buy-in and addresses the issues of choice, affordability, accessibility, intensification, and environmental concerns. But as it stands, I want to be clear that talked with Greg this morning, neither of our chambers can be in a position to support this plan as recommended by staff. And again, some of that is around the LNAs and the amount of being brought into the new official plan. It would be our preference, and I think the business community broadly, as well as I think the entire community, that this be a made in Waterloo plan. But if this is the recommendation forward and approved by council, in our mind, it's not fair and balanced, and it's hard to see how it doesn't end up being a made in Toronto plan. Happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your time.
Okay, the next delegation is Marilyn Hay. Marilyn, welcome.
Hi, you can hear me?
Yes, we can, Marilyn, yes.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Marilyn Hay, and I'm here as the chair of the Kitchener-Waterloo chapter of the Council of Canadians. Today, I'm here specifically to commend the work of the regional planners in crafting a plan which is forward-looking, a model of urban development as Canada moves into a vastly different future. The climate change crisis is upon us all, with ever more violent weather and extreme temperature fluctuations, melting glaciers, rising seas, all leading to massive loss of habitat and extinction of millions of species of life. Even our ubiquitous and beloved monarch butterfly is seriously endangered, as are people and coastal communities and lands becoming too hot to sustain life. The first priority in considering and approving this plan must be to recognize that we need to change how we live, placing emphasis upon the 15-minute communities anchored by efficient and effective, and eventually, one hopes, free public transportation, where people can walk, bike, or roll from home to work, school, daycare, shopping, parkland, and other recreational options. This plan respects the new reality and the urgent necessity to safeguard our rural green space and precious farmland. We will need the green space increasingly in the years ahead for our mental health and physical recreation, and we will need our farms to literally feed us as we cut back on imports to drastically lower emissions worldwide. The plan provides an achievable, inspirational vision which transforms our land use from heavy reliance upon single-family dwellings to a healthier and more affordable mix of housing that will serve the needs of all the members of our communities. The plan's elements also support expansion of the LRT and positions the region to compete effectively for future funding. I want to impress upon you the urgency of approving this plan now, not delaying. The original provincial deadline has already passed. With a municipal election this fall, deferring the approval would cost months. New council members would need to be briefed on the plan and the region's 50 by 30 emission reduction commitments, which are foundational to community design. Developers will push always for more traditional suburbs expanding into our green space and farmland. The province may also push back, but their priorities fail to consider irreversible environmental damage to our natural groundwater filtration, green spaces, and farms. They are all locked in old single-family home modeling with sculpted lawns front and back. Our earth can no longer sustain this profligate approach to housing. I implore you to resist, to stand firm. You're not approving this plan simply for today and the next year or 5 years. You're approving it for the next 30 years. Imagine what those years will bring in probable cataclysmic climate change worldwide. What you're approving now is a region that will be a safe harbor for those who will live, study, yes, I'm in my last line, work and retire here in the decades ahead. A healthy, livable community on Earth. Communities that are a beacon of what is possible as the world grapples with the fallout of worsening climate conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marilyn. The next delegation is Sandra Bray. Sandra? Yes, there you are.
Good afternoon. Thanks for hanging in.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Chair Galloway, Chair Redmond, regional councillors, and regional staff. I come to you as actually a regional resident since the late 60s, a Woolwich resident for many years, as well as co-founder and board member of the 33-year-old Apt Environment. It's that hat I'm wearing today. Apt Environment supports the decision of Woolwich Council to retain all farmland left after some 9,500 acres or so of our ancient and irreplaceable soils, already banked for housing and employment, are developed. Transitions are difficult. Successful transitions mean that some priorities are gradually abandoned for genuine progress. Our regional municipalities have committed to reducing our emissions and providing ourselves with clean energy as a new priority. This is where leadership from more developers and builders in our community could shine. However, market demand will consume until a resource is depleted or a barrier is imposed. More developers and builders need to demonstrate that they have found their role in helping make this transition to our new priorities a cleaner, more intensely occupied region that can feed itself. As Mr. Reeser said, the bottom line is that only 5% of Canada can be used to grow crops or as pasture. You can see all around our community that forward-thinking farmers are trying new strategies and techniques to grow more food in the face of increasing wind and heat and droughts. The agriculture sector is demonstrating how to make a transition, and this is what we also need from developers and builders. Abandoned towns and cities on this continent where housing and employment structures were left when people were unable to feed themselves locally are history's lessons. No system is too big to fail. Market demand cannot be our guide because market demand will consume until a resource is depleted. Please act promptly. Apt Environment thanks the regional staff for this impressive and progressive regional official plan amendment, closely aligned with the 4 municipal councils that voted to preserve existing farmland. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. All right, and I understand now that Stephanie Gertz is in the room. So Stephanie, if you want to proceed, welcome.
Thank you so much, through your chairs. My name is Stephanie Gertz. You've heard me delegate before. You've seen my stuff. I don't need to regurgitate what you've already heard and what amazing delegates have already said previous to me. So I was trying to think about what I should say today. And so I thought about my most recent trip to Sudbury, or the Sudbury area. We were camping. And so we went to Killarney, Grundy, and Kildare, as well as the Tobermory, Manitoulin Islands. And during this trip, I was shocked. I am aware of how abundant and how amazing our farmland is in southwestern Ontario in Waterloo region. But it really shocked me during our travels along the roads was how barren just land, 3 or 4 hours is how barren it is, that it's just rock, and that the trees and everything else is scrambling to try to survive, hastifying and twisting roots over everything and trying to survive. And I really think about, what we have in Waterloo region, and until you see how just within an hour or 2 or 3, how hard it is for things to be sustained, plant life, agricultural, there was no farm fields there. They couldn't create harvestable food like we do in Waterloo region, which is absolutely amazing and beautiful. So I really want you to think about that. And I know you can't do it right now, but just take some look at some pictures of what it looks like there. And it really helps you to appreciate what we have in Waterloo region. And every decision that we make about losing that farmland needs to be taken into consideration. So I also want to say that from some of the arguments we've been hearing today, we need to protect farmland. We need to protect our drinking water. This is obviously true. You know that. But there's other delegates here today that are saying we should just ignore that. Ignore the protection of farmland, ignore drinking water, ignore the urgent climate change, because we need more land to develop more affordable housing. But I want to say again that this is a faulty argument. If you do any research, you just quick Googling it. The Brooklyn Institute, which is a 25-year not-for-profit policy organization, mission is to conduct in-depth research and solving problems facing society. And nowhere in any of their website does it state you need more land to create affordable housing. Your own Municipal Ontario's, our Association of Municipalities of Ontario, created a report. They released it February 22, whole report for provincial, federal, and municipal guidelines. Not one of them stated that you need more land. So we've heard that a lot from a lot of developers or landowners or lawyers, but I want to say that they're here because it's their business to be here. They need to look out for their bottom line. They need to look out for their clients, that's what a business does. A business needs to make sure that they're maximizing money. In the Star, Mississauga's top planner cast doubt on Ontario's Housing Affordability Task Force, and really questioning the premise of, developers phase in growth in order to manage the downward pressure of unit prices. And there's other people that, talk about how, the developers are interested in phrasing in to maximize the market. Like that's what they need to do. The Association of Municipalities of Ontario, again, they stated private companies overall have an interest in maximizing the profits. They're not in it to drive prices down. So you need to take that into a grain of salt when you're making a consideration of how to weigh that. Thank you. Yes, I know 1 minute. We want to look at how researchers, people, and others that are here tonight, they're not in this for themselves. They're not in this to make money. They're not in this to win something or to get somewhere. They're in this because they care about their community. They care about creating vibrant and healthy, robust systems and housing needs. And that includes affordable housing, adequate and just affordable housing. Not one of us argued that we understand that if you don't allow more land, we're comfortable with not having adequate affordable housing. All of us are arguing we absolutely agree. And so we state that this staff report will give adequate affordable housing because there's tons of options for doing laneway homes, granny suites, and other ways that are not being thought about or addressed by the delegates here that say the staff report is not going to meet adequate housing supply. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. And that is the final delegation. We do not have any additional delegations that emailed for the link. So that concludes the matter for today. All correspondence received by the Regional Clerk's Office regarding the draft Regional Official Plan Amendment has been compiled and included on this addendum agenda for Council's consideration. Any additional correspondence received after the addendum agenda was sent up until 3 p.m. this afternoon was sent to Council via email and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. Any correspondence received after this meeting will be sent to Council and included in the August 11th meeting agenda. Also want to thank all the residents that have emailed Council directly with their perspectives on today's agenda. And as always, there are several ways to share your views with Council, including delegating, emailing, or visiting the Engage WR website. Is there any other business? Councillor Foxton.
Sorry, Chair. One more time, and I did send a map to the clerks. Is William there? Is he available to put the map up, or Tim? I just wanted to point out to Council, you see these brown sections?
Yes.
And if you look, all of that is prime agriculture. The brown represents aggregate. There goes all our prime farmland in North Dumfries. So you really don't preserve prime agriculture in North Dumfries because the province has slated all of this as aggregate. Now, the map the gentleman put up before, and he said there was over 1,000 hectares of land already taken in aggregate. He's correct. This is the complete aggregate in North Dumfries. And I just wanted to point that out, that I hear what everybody's saying, and they're absolutely correct. We should have been preserving land and taking care of all of our society for at least 50 years ago, and we haven't. We have to start somewhere. But we also have to realize the difference between where prime is protected and where it isn't. And so I would like to keep this map at the region for reference to say, this is North Dumfries, this is all prime. The only part of the official plan that is allowing for growth is at the Queen Schaefer Boulevard, and it's not agriculture. I mean, it's agriculture, but it's not aggregate. Funny, the only land that it's being recommended by the ROC is land that is not under aggregate. That's all I want to show. I want to show the council and staff this map. It's important to remember. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fox and Councillor Verbanovich.
Thanks, Chair Galloway. And so just two quick points. I mean, first of all, just echo your comments to thank all of the delegations who have delegated, not just today, but throughout this process. There's been clearly a lot of excellent work done, a lot of passion on the issues. There's clearly, as there is in many issues that we deal with around the horseshoe, some differences of opinion, and council will have to grapple those at our meetings in August, along with any additional recommendations from staff. I did want to just flag, because you did indicate that there was a package at 3:00 and from clerks with respect to anything that's been officially submitted ahead of that. I know there was some correspondence from our clerk's office as a follow-up to City of Kitchener Council's meeting last week, and that I don't believe was in that package. I did forward that to council as well, and to the clerk. So I just want to make sure that that does get captured as part of the process today. Thank you.
Yes, staff are nodding in that regard. Okay, no other hands. So the next meeting is August 11th. That's a special meeting of Planning and Works, and there will be a recommended ROP amendment for your consideration at that time, and then subsequently a special council meeting on August the 18th. Councillor Lawrence, you wanted to speak?
Just the process, Mr. Chair, if we could. So what's happening on the 11th? Are we allowing delegations to come back in? We could probably have 50 or 60 or 70. And the same with the on the 18th when we deal with the council? Or are we finished listening to delegations?
No, we're not finished with delegations. We'll have to allow for delegations at least at the August 11th meeting. Possibly not for the August 18th meeting, because in the interim period before August 11th, there is continuing work being done, maps being produced, and maybe Danielle can expand on that. There will be more information that certainly will ask people to only address that new information that is produced between now and then, and not to necessarily repeat what has been said before. Danielle, can you explain it a little better?
Thank you, through the chair. That was a great explanation. We are taking all the feedback from the meeting today, as well as the open houses, all of the correspondence, et cetera, that we've had to date. And we're considering updates to the draft amendment itself, which was released earlier. We will have of the presentation and the report that clearly outline any of the updated policies, et cetera, in the amendment. So there may be some new updated policies or updates, et cetera, within there. So we will allow delegations on the 11th.
The purpose of the statutory meeting, of course, is to hear from the community. We have heard today from quite a number of people. Staff in their wisdom may well make some adjustments in response to some of the submissions or some other matters coming from the municipalities. And we have to provide an opportunity for people to comment on that at our August 11th meeting.
Sure. I guess I'm just concerned about going through this whole process all over again. So everybody that wants to participate on the 11th, they're going to be told that it's only for new information? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, not necessarily. I'm not sure we can, Councillor Rentz, put that kind of prescriptive definition on it. I mean, there may be people who have never delegated before and want to have their say. There may be people who want to delegate again and comment on any new information. Certainly, we will try to impress upon people that they don't need to delegate again just to say the same things, and try to stick to any of the new information that's come forward in the interim. But I'm not sure we're going to be in a good position to, just say you can't speak. I mean, that's kind of not the way we operate.
And I get that, Mr. Chair, and that was not my intent. My intent was to, I think we've listened patiently to all the delegations today and the last public meeting that we had. And certainly I would hate to see us have to go through the whole thing again. But that's I guess that's what I was concerned about. But thank you for explaining it a lot better than I did.
Okay. Councillor Foxton.
Hopefully this is the last time, Chair. I do apologize. But Jeff, to your point, I've been told that regional staff have come in almost every week, taking more away from North Dumfries. So I hear there's another change they're going to take away from us. And so that's the changes we'll be talking about probably on the 11th and 18th.
Councillor Foxton, I think that's unfair. That's hearsay. And
no, actually, it's not hearsay.
But anyways, let's move on. I'm looking for someone to move the adjourning the meeting. Councillor Jaworski and Councillor Rentz, could you please use your buttons to vote accordingly? And that's carried. Okay, thank you very much. See you in a couple of weeks.
Great job, Mr. Chair. Did a good job today.